let me hand over, Andrew, to you. Please do introduce yourself, and then Sarah, and I will turn off my mic and let you give you the floor. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Robin, and good afternoon, everyone. I'll just say a couple of words by way of introduction, then I'm going to hand over to Sarah, who's got a presentation. My name's Andrew McCloy. I'm the chairman of the Peak District National Park Authority. I'm an elected parish member from Mulgrave. In my spare time, or the spare time I have, I'm a writer, journalist, consultant with a broad background in access and recreation mainly, but I've also done some business development work with the likes of Bakewell and Eyre Community Transport. So I have got an interest and some knowledge of the topic, but we've all got interest and knowledge in the topic because transport, travel in this busy national park, this accessible national park, is relevant to everyone and affects everyone as well. It's probably just worth repeating that we are probably the most accessible national park in Britain. We have 20 million people within 1 hour's journey, and quite possibly more. And yes, sometimes on busy summer Sundays, it's like they all turn up at once. But the problem we've got, of course, is that 9 out of 10 turn up by car. And that's the pressure that we face, our environment faces, and our resident communities face as well. And this has been highlighted, especially in the last 18 months in between lockdowns, when not just this national park, but across Britain, beaches, nature reserves, national parks, and even urban parks have been under intense visitor pressure. And our remit as a national park is to conserve and enhance the natural beauty in the environment, but at the same time it's to promote understanding and enjoyment by the public. We have a national role as well as a local role, and in carrying that out we have to have regard for the welfare of the 38,000 people that live and work in the national park, many of whom, of course, whose jobs rely on those very visitors that come here. So it is daily a balancing act that our small organisation does to the best of its ability on a very small budget and with limited resources. But the other thing, and I think this will come out hopefully in the next hour, is transport and travel is extremely important to us, but we are not the Transport Authority. It is not a statutory function of a national park. That is the county council in most cases, Derbyshire the principal authority, but we have 11 constituent authorities that come into the park, including the big metropolitans like Sheffield and Manchester. So it is a very complicated picture, and believe me, there's no easy solution, because if there was, we would have found it by now. It's a balancing act. It always has been, always will be, but I'm very clear as we celebrate our 70th year that as the first national park, the Peak District has always been pioneering. We've led the way. 70 years ago, no one in Britain knew much about national parks or how they would be run in Britain. We pioneered that. First warden or ranger service, the first visitor centre, the first access agreements, and so on. I think the challenge for us, and it's all of us as well, it's not just the National Park Authority, is to try and find ways to sustainably embrace the visitors who come here for education, enjoyment, relaxation, and believe me, we are well aware over the course of this pandemic how important the national park has been for so many people here and outside our boundary. But we've got to find a way long term that people can travel here and travel around the park sustainably, that doesn't have a long-term impact on the environment they come to cherish and the people that live and work here. And we've got to be smart about that, got to be clever about that. There isn't one solution. There could be all manner of different ways to address this. And we're going to kick off today just by floating some ideas and looking for feedback. And with that, I'll shut up for the minute and hand over to Sarah Fowler, our Chief Executive, who will shortly take you through a presentation. Sarah, over to you.
Andrew, thanks very much and welcome everyone. Really good to have you all here, and thank you, Robin and Peter, for the invitation. It's a great opportunity for us to hear from the businesses about our ideas. So I do have a presentation here I was going to share with you. Let's just check it's going to work. Let's make sure I'm on the right slide to start with. Is that all working? Yeah, I can see some thumbs up. Fantastic. As Andrew's saying, we're not here as in a strategy role in any shape or form, because we don't have a statutory function around transport. We do, however, have a function about promoting that opportunity to enjoy, care for the place, and in doing that, looking after the communities that live and work in the national park. And that's why we're here. We're here to share an ambition and an idea with you. And an idea to find an integrated solution to some of the transport challenges that support the businesses within the national park, supports the community in the national park, and maintains that gain that we've got in terms of wider range of visitors enjoying our national park. So this is not about statutory role, this is much more about thought leadership, I think, and asking you, do you support these ideas, and are you willing to work with us on these? So that's what my presentation is really about, rethinking how we travel in and around the national park. You will all know this as businesses who operate within or surround the national park. We're one of 15. We were fought for by those revolutionaries to be stewards of the best of the countryside. We cover 10% of the land in the UK. Resident population across all the national parks of 500,000, and we are the source of immeasurable pleasure with bringing economic value to the nation and economic value to some of our deeply rural areas as well. And we see our role as being innovation engines for green recovery, particularly from the COVID pandemic, and wanting to be that beacon for how things can happen elsewhere in the rural environment. Peak District, as you'll know, stands out at the heart of the nation. As Andrew says, we are surrounded by some major urban conurbations, and we also have really quite a complex geopolitical boundary, and that map there demonstrates the links we have with various different county councils and district councils. And we're at the watershed of three main catchments as well. Place of Pioneers, as Andrew said. In total, we cover 555 square miles, all the way from Saddleworth Moor up at the top, all the way down to Ashbourne, down at the south. And I was out at Ashbourne this morning. And we are that land of contrast. And as Andrew said, we're one of the most accessible national parks in the country. And we're at that pivot point. We've got 7 highways authorities that we engage with, 6 transport authorities, 2 strategic transport bodies. And we've got 38,000 residents and 18,000 jobs that are supported within the national park. All of that is about how we balance supporting of that as well as looking after the landscape and the place. I'm going to start with the Peak District National Park Management Plan. This management plan is essentially our partnership plan for the place. It sets out the partners' ambitions for the place for the next 5 years. We're just about to start reviewing this. This is the current strategy that runs from 2018 to 2023. And what we're talking to you today about, really, and getting your ideas from, cover a number of priority areas for us, preparing for a future climate. How can we have a transport system in the national park that reduces our carbon outputs? How can we create a national park for everyone? And how can we support those communities and the economy in the national park by having a decent transport system as well? So I'm going to look back to 2020 because it really brought to life for us some of the challenges that we've got, and really brought to life to us the transport challenges that we've got. These are some photographs taken from around the national park. You might even recognise some of these locations that demonstrates some of the challenges I know many businesses and many communities in the national park had to deal with. We've got problems here with some of our emergency services being able to access locations because of really quite inappropriate and dangerous car parking, and the impact that has on villages, the impact that has on the pleasure of people coming to the national park, not being able to find somewhere or be able to get around. Those were the challenges that we faced, let alone the litter and other elements. So there were positives there in summer 2020, and what I wanted to do is build on those positives and what worked well. We did see a much greater diversity of people coming to enjoy the national park. Many people woke up to the value that our national parks bring to the nation. I'm really grateful for the joint working that was brought about as a consequence of the easing of lockdown. It brought us much closer together in the way that we work in partnership. We work very well with Derbyshire County Council, for example, thinking about thoughtful WA lines, and we supported a number of landowners about temporary car parks to be set up. Huge amount of litter picking and visitor engagement with volunteer rangers. I really want to thank the communities that got engaged in this as well, because there was a huge community effort here. And on our own car parks and across car parks in the National Park, we set up an alert system, a red, amber, green, so that visitors coming would know if the car park was full. And if it was full, we were asking visitors to go think elsewhere. So this was all about planning ahead. All of this is about being Peak District proud, so we can respect, protect and enjoy the National Park. So learning from the past year, I think we do have to recognise that as a national park, we are already a really popular place to visit. Eyre is the most popular 1 kilometre square to begin a route from, according to Ordnance Survey. There are 7 other locations in the Hope Valley that make the top 20 of the Ordnance Survey popular locations. And COVID-19 has only amplified that, with many discovering the joy of the national park. I mean, we've been measuring the usage on the Monsell Trail last year, and on the busiest day in the summer last year, based on the average day, it quadrupled. And as Andrew said, the first question a lot of people ask themselves in terms of getting into the national park, whether you live here or whether you visit, is do I own a car or a van? 90% of people access it by car and van. And that volume last year has reached a point that does not go without that impact on local communities, the landscape, and also the visitor who's coming to enjoy the national park. So we do need to address this situation. We absolutely recognise that. And how visitors travel here matters. It matters to the many businesses who are benefiting from that tourism and economic input that visitors give to us. So we want to encourage that visitor for the economy, but we want to carry on supporting the many businesses that need that visitor economy and also need good travel to get around themselves. It matters because we do want to support a safe home for the communities that live and work here. And it matters because we do want to maintain that gain in the greater diversity of people enjoying the national park. So for me, this is about a moment about rethinking how people travel here as we rebuild that economy and our tourism. So that's what the sort of our thinking has sort of turned towards. And it's built off the back of 2 things, really. I don't know if many of you know that back in September 2019, so before COVID hit us, we had a major review take place of national parks and AONBs. That review reported to the government in September 2019, and one of the key recommendations was about a stronger mission for us to connect all people to our national landscapes and looking at a new approach to coordinating public transport. They said to be piloted in the Lake District. We want to pilot it in the Peak District because I think given our visitor economy and given our location, we've got to pilot it here. And off the back of that, we have added to the delivery plan in our National Park Management Plan, and we have got a target in there to initiate an ambitious low carbon rural transport scheme. It makes it into our National Park Management Plan because if we can achieve that, it has a big impact and a big benefit to the many communities who are sort of have a stake in the national park, but actually it also needs partnership working for us to deliver it. And this is our idea. We want to develop an idea about gateway sites around the national park, locations that are on the outskirts of the national park, whether it's Matlock, whether it's Ashbourne or Chesterfield, whether it's Buxton, or whether it's Macclesfield, or whether it's Sheffield. Those sites where people coming to visit the national park can access via mass transit, whether it's via train, because there's some really good train services on the outskirts of the national park, or whether it's by car. But once they get to those gateway sites, how do we then help people move from those gateway sites to recreational hubs in the national park? Recreational hubs might be those locations, for example, Langsett, or they might well be the Derwent Valley, or they might well be Chatsworth House or Tissington, for example. How do they get to those recreational hubs in a sustainable way? And then how do we disperse them from those hubs into more low-key sites that are far more sensitive locations than the national park. So it's this concept of mass transit to the gateway sites and then travel between the gateway sites, the recreation hubs and the low dispersal sites with an integrated, sustainable transport offer. And that's the important thing. How can we get an integrated transport offer that looks at sort of a travel hierarchy, which is high quality active travel, accessing by using our own pedal power or feet power, and then integrated public transport and using of electric vehicles as well, before we start thinking about sort of more high carbon intensive access. We've got some barriers that we have to overcome if we want to achieve that. One of the main barriers really is that a lot of the policy drivers for travel and transport are weighted towards supporting commuting and utility travel. What do I mean by that? Travel for work, basically, and travel to access services like retail and shops, essentially town to town. Yet in rural areas, and we know this in the Peak District, a lot of people travel to the Peak District is town to country, back to town. And that demand has been exacerbated by COVID. 63% of people travel for leisure. That visiting friends and family, which is the 22%, the bright green in that chart, 22% visit for friends and family, 23% for holiday, 7% for day trips, 9% for other leisure. That chunk, green chunk of travel is not weighted in any transport policy decisions or any transport sort of funding. We've also got, as I showed you with that picture about our geopolitical boundary within the national park, a really fragmentation, the risk of a huge fragmentation of effort, fragmentation of travel linkages and a fragmentation of ticketing. Can you come into the national park and then hop on one bus that starts in Derbyshire and finishes in Manchester? I'm not sure you can at the moment. So we've got a bold ambition. And we are starting small because we've got to start small. And our aim is to try and scale up quickly. And we're progressing some quick wins here. So the Hope Valley Explorer, I don't know if any of you enjoyed the Hope Valley Explorer. We introduced it as a National Park Authority back in 2019. It was incredibly successful, actually. It's a visitor bus. It's a visitor bus service. Starts in Chesterfield and Johnfield, and it goes through the Hope Valley. It goes through the Lower Derwent Valley and along the Hope Valley, connects with the Hope Valley Railway line, and then goes back again at the end of the day. And it's a hop-on, hop-off bus that provides commentary about what you're visiting. We didn't do it last year. We're returning it this summer. This summer we're doing it at weekends only. It's going to have to be a bigger bus, unfortunately, because of the COVID requirements for space. But we are including a bike element to it as well. And our Staffordshire County Council have also just won a pilot to be able to do a demand responsive service between Leek and Buxton, and we're working with them about how that we can connect various services together. So we're progressing with partners some quick wins here. Active travel, one of our big priorities is to complete the White Peak Loop, that the Monsell Trail basically from Matlock all the way through to Buxton, to be able to travel through the national park in a safe off-road active travel corridor, so we can explore and enjoy the national park in that way. And then on rail, some of our partners I know are working with both Northern Rail and Midlands Rail to look at how those gateway locations can operate. We've got Northern Rail that's got the Hope Valley line. We've got the Derwent Valley line that brings people up from Derby into Matlock. How can we encourage bike trains and the likes in terms of those franchises? And those conversations are happening as well. There's a lot of community-led initiatives, and I really thank the community. The Buxton Town team are doing some great work on travel surveys and developing their own town travel plan. Hope Valley Climate Action Group is wanting to increase cycling, increase public transport to reduce the reliance on the car. And I think we're really keen about whether we can pilot with those communities some really innovative projects, community-led projects, because those are the ones that have a sticky, that have a legacy. Because what we want to do is find solutions that last, not solutions that come and go with funding. And we are building and strengthening a collaboration alongside a whole range of partners, ourselves working with the county councils, D20, Marketing Peak District in Derbyshire, Universities of Sheffield and Derby, and the development of the Peak Resort in Chesterfield, I think, presents us with some really exciting opportunities as well. So that's the work that we're doing at the moment. What we're thinking about is how we can scale this up rapidly. And I guess my ask of you is, will you join us in support of this concept of a low carbon sustainable transport pilot, this concept of integrated infrastructure, integrated planning, get our ticketing working together? And actually, part of this is the simple approach of marketing, integrating our marketing so people can understand how things connect together to create that momentum for change. As Andrew says, we are a really small organisation. We're actually not funded to do this, but we recognise that actually this is an important role for us to play in that convening and thought leadership. So we are seeking some revenue funding, as well as obviously then working with partners to help partners get the capital funding to make the solutions work. And I'm really keen that we can try and announce that something to take forward in this, our 70th anniversary year. That's what I'd really love to do, is talk about something ambitious in our 70th anniversary year that actually we're delivering something on. You can see we're working on small strands. Can we put it all together? Robin, I'm going to stop sharing. And for me and Andrew, it really is about listening to those people who are here to hear what their thoughts are about those ideas and how they can help us and what their suggestions are. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. And thank you, Andrew, as well. We do have one question that was asked prior to the webinar. Pete, I think we've got one or two other questions as well. Would you like to fire away, Pete? You need to turn your mic on.
I was transfixed by the presentation, Sarah. That was brilliant. And there's some great questions coming through. Can we begin with Michael? Is connections with GMPTE and their equivalents in Sheffield and Derby part of the picture?
Yes, is the answer, is a clear answer, because about connecting with all the major conurbations around us. So I have started a conversation with Sheffield City Region. We have had some conversations with Greater Manchester as well. And one of my big hopes, by way of an example, Greater Manchester, I've introduced something called an hour pass for young people to be able to travel for free around Greater Manchester. It stops at the border. How can we provide an opportunity for young people to access the national park through the Hope Valley line to enable that to happen? So short answer is yes. And if anyone's got any connections that will help us connect into there, I'd really value hearing about that.
Okay, that's great. We had a previous session with the team from Peak Resort, Rupert Carr and so on. You mentioned Peak Resort. How does that feature in the plans and the vision?
So I'm hopeful, and Andrew, please do come in. I'm hopeful that Peak Resort can be one of our pilots. This concept of that sort of gateway location,
yeah,
where people come into Chesterfield, and actually the great value of Peak Resort, it gives an opportunity for people to enjoy town and country, town and the national park, and experience actually the whole value of what Derbyshire offers. And we're talking to Rupert Carr about this concept of demand responsive travel from Peak Resort into the national park. And for me, demand responsive travel is how we can aggregate enough people together to make it work and operate.
Okay.
There's also, if I can just come in as well,
yeah.
This also talks to the need to be smart about this, to be original about this. We need to find out where visitors want to go and why. So that, for instance, Peak Resorts, and I'm sure Rupert will do this, where do most of the visitors want to go? Do they want to head for Chatsworth, or do they want to head for quieter corners of the park? And so once we get that intelligence together, we can almost design a transport offer around their needs, which will hopefully make it more successful and more rewarding. And ultimately more efficient, and that can be replicated elsewhere. It's about being flexible and imaginative in the transport offer. It's not just a park and ride bus that drops you in Bakewell. It has to be more than that.
Okay, we've got questions flooding in. Can I just ask one more about individuals who wish to come to the park with mobility challenges? and who would normally use perhaps their own vehicles. Sometimes public transport vehicles are not ideally suited for their needs. Are you taking their needs on board?
I think we have to, Peter, because the whole concept that we've got around national parks being here for all means that we really do need to be here for all, because for all means for all. We're doing some, I mean, we recently, about 4 years ago, we won an award from Accessible Derbyshire for the projects that we're doing on accessibility. Our own Parsley Hay Cycle Hire Centre is doing a lot of work around that. So we do need to think about that transport offer as well, and that might be a different offer.
Yeah, okay, great, thank you. Now, Sir Richard Fitzherbert, do you know how many EV charge points are in the national park? This could be a quick win to get people thinking about their travel plans and their carbon offset.
The short answer is no, we don't know exactly how many, although Sarah might have her finger more closely on the pulse. I was talking to the Derbyshire County Council leader, Barry Lewis, about this very subject yesterday, and we have a shared ambition to get as many EV points out throughout the national park as quickly as possible. The problem we've faced as a National Park Authority with our own car parks on our own land is the fact that a lot of these are remote rural locations. The power supply is sometimes not adequate, and it costs a lot of money to put them in outside of urban areas. So inevitably, rural areas have been too far down the line, but we're making progress, and we're really heartened that Derbyshire County Council has got it as a priority action. I think we could really push on now.
Can I just come back on that? Because we've got a board member on Business Peak District who is focused on this area. He has a business involving that. Is he online tonight, Robin? Could he come in?
Yes. So Jim Sweeney. Yeah. So I think. Yes. Sarah, Andrew, do you know Jim? I mean, I don't want to go off topic. Pete, yes. So Jim is with us tonight. Yeah.
So Jim might want to come in at some point. I also am aware of a number of businesses that are also looking to make services available. It feels as if there is the basis for a quick win here. In other words, we've got the private sector, we've got the county council, we've got the National Park Authority. We've all got the same ambition. We've all seen those scatterplot maps which show all those charging points that are around the periphery of the national park and the vacuum, almost vacuum in the national park. There may be a solution to be had, and Sarah, really cognizant of the point about quick wins. There might be a quick win to be had here, no more than that at the present moment in time. Shall we move on to another question? And Jim might wish to join us at some point. Frank Bagshaw asks, we're currently in the Lakes. There is an open top double-decker bus service from Grasmere to Bowness every 20 minutes. Quite well used this week. Any thoughts of something similar?
I think that's we haven't got an open top one, I'm afraid. So sorry about that. But that's the concept behind the Hope Valley Explorer. It is a visitor service that's hop on, hop off, and we're getting a lot of interest in that actually. And I'm really grateful to some partners who are helping fund it with us. So Derbyshire Dales District Council, for example, are supporting us this year in it. So are there opportunities to expand it and have connections down elsewhere from the Hope Valley? So we're keen to do more of that as we progress it from this year onwards.
So I spent a few days in Snowdonia over the weekend and into this week, and then for my sins visited Llandudno. And there are these historic buses travelling around, providing some open top in Llandudno, some closed, lovely 1950s vehicles. You can see that as a nice little business proposition for someone with this form of transport. So whatever we can do to invite them to come on board and support us, more the merrier. John Geddes, Until we get national road pricing, how are you expecting to tempt people to use public transport from the hubs rather than drive all the way? Even if the transport is frequent, the cost for 2 to 4 tickets each way is going to be vastly more than the marginal cost of driving the car, however well integrated the ticketing.
There's a challenge there, Peter, and with carrots, we're hoping that through the work that we're doing, especially with an example of visitor buses, that the draw is not just you hop on a bus and see it as a way of getting from A to B. The experience of being on the bus gives you an interpretation of the landscape you're in and the information and you get much more information to enjoy your your trip. However, there might well need to be some carrots too. That's not within our remit, but I think we do need to think about sticks as well, Si.
No, absolutely. And I've been around long enough at the authority and with community transport as well to remember when the Upper Derwent Valley route around the reservoirs was closed off and a hopper bus was provided, a subsidised hopper bus was provided, which was popular, but unfortunately the subsidy lapsed. The road had to be closed and the road effectively was closed at weekends. It's not impossible, given the congested nature of some honeypot sites, that if we worked with the highway authorities and we looked imaginatively at schemes, seasonal road closures or targeted closures, as long as another form of transport was offered to get people around, might be an option. Certainly, I know that some local people would welcome it, but that would have to be thought out and have to be with the support of local businesses, because it happens elsewhere. And ultimately, too many vehicles, too many cars on small country roads is going to make it congested. And we may have to think differently as we go on.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. Now, John, who's a Winster resident, wrote in before the session. You may have addressed this, but just let's focus on it. How supportive are you of demand responsive transport, the government's preference, particularly around minibuses, rather than the timetabled bus services in rural areas?
John, hello. I haven't seen you for a while, Winster, but thank you for your question. And I know you have a lot of specialist knowledge in this area. And I have, to an extent, with community transport, where demand responsive effectively forms the basis for the shopping trips and the hospital visits, and works very well, but works very well with that particular group of people and that particular clientele, albeit subsidised to an extent. I don't see demand responsive as the panacea to replace all timetable bus services, but I do see it as part of the mix, and I do think it's worth trialling in a rural context, because there are, as John knows, there are all different forms of demand responsive, and elsewhere in the country, I'm thinking Lincolnshire, rural Lincolnshire in particular, DRT and variations of DRT have worked quite effectively, but I don't think there's one size that fits all, and we need to get to a position where we get to a system in the Peak District where visitor spend can help subsidise improved services for local people, but I don't think they will ever replace, and I don't think they should ever replace, timetable services, because we know a lot of residents in our small villages in particular, older residents especially, who don't have recourse to the car, are suffering as timetables slip and buses disappear, and we need to find a long-term solution. So it may be a mixed economy, and DRT may well have its place.
Okay, now John has written a more extensive email. What I suggest is that we pick up some of the points in that outside of this discussion, because we've got a lot of correspondence here at the moment. So if that's all right with you, Andrew and Sarah, we'll move on. In no particular order, well, in the order in which they came in, Sir Richard Fitzherbert, really interesting one here, a little bit contentious. As regards encouraging visitors to get here sustainably, might you consider new accommodation, brackets, which your policies would not normally favour, close brackets, providing the accommodation is accessed by sustainable travel, only, e.g. electric and hydrogen vehicles? Could this be a condition for planning? It will be a top story and a top selling point. And I believe Sir Richard Fitzherbert now chairs the Marketing Peak District in Derbyshire. So he's clearly got a key interest in this.
Andrew, let me go first on that one. And Richard, that's a really, really good question. So thank you. First and foremost, I think we do support accommodation where it's appropriate. We've supported new hotel in Bakewell at Riverside. We've supported a new hotel along the Hope Valley as well through the planning decisions that members are making and officers are supporting. So I think we are currently reviewing our local plan at the moment. And that will be an opportunity, I think, for you to feed in suggestions and ideas like that as we review our local plan, to think about how we can connect these two together. And also, we will be coming out very shortly with a high-level survey as we start thinking about refreshing the National Park Management Plan as well. So again, please use those surveys that are out there at the moment and as an opportunity for putting those ideas forward. The sort of tying in, and we have tried to on a number of occasions to tie in planning permissions into sustainable transport, and part of that's reliant on the planning applicant being willing to do that. So maybe we need to get a bit harsher on that one as well. Andrew, over to you if you want to say anything.
Yeah, Richard, thank you. We can always rely on you for imaginative and challenging questions, but I do appreciate it because this is all about thinking outside the box. I'm slightly wary of how it would fit into planning policy and how robust it would be to challenge. However, these are the kind of things, as Sarah said, when we go into the local plan review, which we are just about to embark on, that we can actively discuss. I don't want to, though, discriminate against particular types of users or particular people from income groups as well. And on the electric vehicle issue, we must also bear in mind that electric vehicles, whilst definitely they are the way forward, the Peak District suffers from the sheer number of vehicles in the first place. So it is also about trying our best to reduce the number of private cars, not just switch to different types of car. But in terms of accommodation, yes, let's look at the full list of incentives, the full manner that we can attract people here by sustainable means, and that might mean rewarding in some capacity, whether that's through the planning process. I think requires further discussion and further thought.
Okay, colleagues, the questions really are flying in now, so we're going to have to be really focused in our answers. Just as an aside, because some of the questions are kind of hinting at a no differentiation between visitors and residents, and so just be mindful that, are we talking about transport for those visiting the park or those living in the park and looking to move around it? And could those people inadvertently who are residents be negatively impacted trying to get to work and so on and so forth by it? But I'll hold that thought for the moment. Faith Johnson, has a London-style automatic charge zone for the national park boundary been considered for cars and vans?
Wow, there's an even more controversial one there. It would involve a lot of infrastructure, and I think we've got to be mindful, Peter, of what you've just said about how it impacts the communities that live in the national park. How do we run this in a way that doesn't negatively impact those that live and work here? I think that wouldn't be my first choice. I think would be my answer given that.
Can we move on, because there are, as I say, so many questions to answer here.
Sorry, Peter. Let's just say we can go over the hour if you like.
Okay, yeah, I've got another meeting at past, but anyway, yeah, that's fine. Okay, but let's see how far we can get. Michael, how far would car park charges go towards subsidising public transport?
I'm not sure far enough. Is the short answer. But car park charges. Let's look at how we work across all partners in terms of how car park charges are raised. So yeah, that's a short answer, Peter.
And Peter, it is slightly more complicated and nuanced than that, because if you put up car parking charges too much, you will displace those cars into the centre of villages, on the roadside and on farmers' gates, and then you'll have even more problems. So it's not always that straightforward.
Okay. Rebecca has written, you mentioned various partners. Do you plan to also include the public via citizen science projects, e.g. surveys of current and future use of low, high carbon transport to help build an evidence base needed to secure grants, data collection to help with pilot initiatives, etc.?
That's a great idea. I know that Buxton Town Team, for example, has done a huge survey across Buxton, and I think Hope Valley Climate Action Group, maybe they could sort of we could support them in doing a similar sort of survey. And Peter, if I may be cheeky, it would be great to work with University of Derby to support us on that sort of work as well.
Yeah, and there's an ongoing conversation which I think we need to bring to a successful conclusion in the near future around that. But yeah, we're here to support. Okay, next, Bob, who is an entrepreneur based in Derby, Bob Owusu, got a really interesting question. Much of the conversation so far is about visitors from those hub points getting into the national park. What about from their home to the hubs? What's going to incentivize them there to think about accessing the hub as the route into the national park when they are leaving their house?
That's extending our powers way into the city centres, or lack of powers. It's a really valid question, because what we're trying to solve here is the final mile. It's more than the final mile into the Peak District. We're trying to solve that final mile, but it's a really valid question to make us think about actually how do you solve the first mile as well for people, and how do we work with partners in Greater Manchester, Derby and Sheffield to think about that first mile. I think because a lot of this is around sort of city centre living, that first mile might be easier to solve than the final mile.
And certainly, yeah, certainly some of the conversations I've had, I remember when I used to sit on the board of Marketing Peak District, and we were looking at those, for example, in their mid-30s living in the northern quarter of Manchester, and many of them don't own a vehicle, and therefore it's relatively easy to get them onto a train, if we had a decent train into the Peak District from Manchester, and that's a different discussion. But there are other communities where those local communities do rely heavily on their own private transport. So I think Bob's got a really valid question. Where does the journey start from, and how do we consider that? There are some follow-up questions here, which I'll come on to in a second, but a fresh question has come in from Derek Latham. Could we arrange for timetabled and tourist buses to have racks for bicycles so that families can include public transport to get to the Peak District and then enjoy riding through the landscape? I know Derek's an enthusiastic cyclist himself. You mentioned it about the bus transport in the Hope Valley. Is there an ambition to work with others to provide that more extensively?
So we're doing it on the Hope Valley this year. I don't know, Derek, if you heard that at the start. So we are offering that bike sort of ability for people using the Hope Valley Explorer. Andrew mentioned the conversation we had yesterday with the leader of the Derbyshire County Council, and they're keen to bring us into conversations around sort of future bus services. So that will be one that I know that they are keen on and that we are keen on too. But
Peter, also there's a conversation that not just us, because we have limitations on who we can talk to and how many people we can talk to, but the rail operators, we'd like to see more people bringing their bikes on the trains, because you go to Denmark or Holland, they've got whole carriages devoted to bikes. If we could see a whole carriage devoted to bikes of a train coming in on the Hope Valley line or into Glossop, or into Buxton, or into Matlock, we can make a real big step forward, because there you'll be able to join the Monsell Trail, and then suddenly that through journey on sustainable means is actually possible.
And I'm a frequent visitor to Switzerland, and there you see even the verniculars going up the side of mountains, an entire carriage dedicated to cycles or skis or whatever it might be, depending on the time of year. And it's a powerful attractor for those traveling on them. Just by way of follow-ups, and some really interesting points, clearly there's some concern around this idea of having charges for those accessing the park. So Faith follows up on her original question, saying the tech could simply exclude residents, so they could fly past the checkpoint, or whatever you wish to call it, and visitors would have to stop. John is coming back on that point, saying please try and avoid local road pricing or toll systems. They have all sorts of negative connotations. For example, people looking to move into the Peak District to work. Well, of course, perhaps Faith's addressed that one. People looking to have out of park services for their children, etc., etc., etc. It's a really complex issue, but I'm hearing that you're not immediately thinking about putting checkpoints around the perimeter to exclude people, nor the barbed wire fencing and so on. Okay, so we can rest easy a little bit there. Yeah, okay, right. We are where we are. What time is it? It's at 5:52. You were brilliant in answering succinctly and so on. I think there are one or two questions that probably merit a longer answer that we can give outside of the meeting itself. We've had another colleague from the National Park emailing me at the same time, so it's all cracking off tonight. But Robin, back to you.
Thanks, Pete. Sarah, Andrew, thank you ever so much. Do you have any perhaps comments to make from what you've heard tonight? Any final comments to round up?
From my perspective, I'm not surprised at the interest, the enthusiasm, the ideas and the discussion this generates. Of course it does, because this affects everyone. This affects businesses. This affects local people as well as the millions that visit. And just that short comment about bikes on trains and buses, we are way behind where they are on the continent on this. Here in one of our busiest national parks, where recreation is uppermost, we've got a long way to catch up, but we can do it. But let's manage our expectations of the National Park Authority. We are a small body. We've got limited resources and limited powers, which are mainly focused on planning and landscape. However, we've got the appetite and ambition to work with all our partners, and that includes everyone watching this and the public too, because if we get it right, we don't just help the environment and make a significant contribution to climate change and the air pollution for local people as well, but businesses can thrive on the back of this. I'm thinking the green recovery, where national parks should be, and to an extent are leading the way. This is a great opportunity, but there's no quick fix, and there may be lots of different solutions. And a congestion charge for a national park, don't think it's on the cards, but we're going that way with the number of cars on the road, so something needs to happen.
Robin, very briefly for me, thank you for those thought-provoking comments and questions. It's those sort of challenging questions that help us formulate our future direction. I would just finish off by saying two things really. One, we mustn't underestimate the policy barriers here for us to enact change, as I shared on the presentation. And number two, well, we've got those bold ambitions and we're starting small. To be able to scale this quickly, you can be our champions with us, work with us, support us, speak up about where we want to go, and be our champion to try and overcome some of those policy barriers and those funding barriers to make this work, because it's only by doing that that we can actually make some progress here. Thank you everyone for your comments.
And if people want to support your cause, how can they get in contact with you, or or show their thumbs up? Where would they go? What would they do?
That is a jolly good question, Robin. And I think in the first stage would be because this is about leadership from us. So it's myself and my head of planning, and I've got one transport officer that is dealing with a whole range of things, including some major infrastructure in the national park. So the answer to your question is, I'm not sure if I dare say it, but email me in the first instance, please.
Okay,
maybe...
and just to be clear, would that be through the contact form on the website, rather than giving your email address out and you get riddled with spam? Would that be the best option?
So my suggestion is, if people are supportive of this and want to join a sort of a community and business support of this, I think it will be and want to be part of finding the solution. Let me know. And we'll think about how we can build a sort of a business sort of working group around this.
And Robin, can I just add, can I urge people to use their networks, to get involved in community groups like Hope Valley Climate Action, but also lobby your elected representatives. Our constituent MPs, Robert Largan in the High Peak is a really good example. He is really switched on about the transport going forward and the possibilities. They need to hear from you. They need to know that's important for you and your business and for the future of the national park. I think that's one way forward that you can help. Raise it up the agenda with people.
Thank you. Pete, did you want to say something?
I did, yes. So Sarah, Andrew, I wear several different hats, one of which is Chair of Peak District Partnership. And Sarah, you've attended those sessions in the past. We organise an annual think tank. The next one is July the 1st, which is looking at the role of social enterprise in the Peak District's recovery from the pandemic. I'm just wondering whether the future of transport and a think tank around that could be another one that we could look to work to support the national park in delivering, and bringing key organisations together to consider. It may be appropriate for you, may not wish to pick that up, but there's an opportunity for you.
That's a really good idea, and that might be the avenue through if anyone's interested to sort of engage in that next conversation there.
Yeah.
So we could invite you to that next conversation. So Peter, thank you. So if you do contact me, that's the way I'll take it forward.
Sarah, Andrew, thank you ever so much. Thank you very much to our guests for attending tonight. This is recorded. I will add it to our YouTube channel. I hope you're all safe and well, and I look forward to seeing you all next week when we have the Department of International Trade talking. Sarah, Andrew, thank you ever so much. Thank you, Pete. And I will hopefully see everybody in reality very soon. Thank you very much. Goodbye.